Hello my loves, and welcome back to another Plan With Me video. So my ear is so incredibly plugged up right now, so I can literally hear myself talking. It's really annoying, but I am committed to getting this intro done, even though I hate hearing myself talk. So let's do this. I want to apologize because this video literally is coming out so late. You guys are probably already done with your July planning needs, but I have just been dealing with a bunch of feelings of, let's just say, like lack of motivation when it comes to bullet journaling and feelings of like burnt outness. I don't want to get into too much of it here because I go into how I'm dealing with it and managing it in the video itself. So let's just get into it. You will hear all about it. Alright my loves, let's get started on the cover page. I'm going to be focusing on doing an incredibly minimal design here. So the July lettering is done in a Sakura Pigma fine liner in a sepia tone. Actually, for the entire theme, any sort of lettering, outlining, or writing, I am going to be using the Sakura fine liners in the sepia tone. So for the July header, I used a size 03 fine liner, and then for the numerical monthly calendar, I used a 01. And if you couldn't already tell, the theme for this month is Victorian / vintage teacups with plants coming out of them. So I am outlining all of the little details in a size 003 fine liner, and then I'm going to go over it in gouache paint. But later on in the theme, I decided to skip the outlining altogether and just go over the pencil with paint instead. It's because I realized the outlining was kind of a waste of time because the paint was covering up the outlining anyways. But of course, depending on the style we're going for here, if we did want an outline there and not just, paint, then we could technically go over the paint with the fine liner to create more of that contrast and have an outline present. So the inspiration for this theme actually came from my lack of motivation in wanting to bullet journal. I think I've just been kind of feeling a little burnt out over like all of the things I'm doing with Layla journals, right? Like YouTube, Patreon, Instagram. And I also noticed that a lot of my bullet journal spreads have become a lot more elaborate and a lot more detailed and kind of drifting farther and farther away from that minimal look that I really like doing when I first started bullet journaling. So obviously bullet journaling has now become incredibly time consuming, and I have been feeling this pressure to maximize the creative space on every single bullet journal spread. And also I think I've been creating page spreads that I haven't necessarily wanted to do, but I'm just doing them because now I've gotten in the routine of doing them. For example, the lettering pages and the self-care page that I do every single month. So this was in a way kind of defeating the whole purpose of bullet journaling for me, because I see bullet journaling as a way to organize my life and make it less stressful, and it's a way for me to explore my creativity in the ways that I actually want to, instead of having that more pressured mindset attached to it. So for this month, I really wanted to just reevaluate everything that I realistically can expect myself to do, and I basically came to the conclusion that I want to go back to creating more minimal page spreads, and I'm just skipping the lettering and self-care page altogether this month. So we're just going to do the cover, a quote page, the monthly, the habit and mood tracker, and just a weekly, and we're just going to keep it simple. I have more to say on this, but we'll go into it a little bit later. So for the inspiration for this theme, I went to Pinterest and I looked up vintage teacups and gathered all of the ones that I thought were beautiful and put them into my own little Pinterest board. And then in order to create these sketches, I just took bits and pieces of the different photographs and kind of just compiled, oh my god, I'm trying to say combined and compiled together. But yeah, I just put them kind of together and then drew these out. And then I added some washi tape and pieces of book pages here. So adding that grid pattern in the background was kind of a last minute decision, and it's because it kind of just looked empty, as if something was missing, and as soon as I added that in, I thought the whole thing came together very well. I just love the contrast between the vintage look and a more modern minimal look, because vintage and minimalism, I constantly struggle between both of those aesthetics, and so combining them together is one of my favorite things to do. I also just feel like the grid pattern kind of looks like a trellis, and a trellis is something that you use in the planting gardening world, so hey, it fits in my opinion. Anyways, for the color palette of this month's theme, I definitely wanted a more summery type of vibe. Of course, because we're painting flowers here, I wanted to stick with the neutrals, but I did add some more pastel pinks and yellows and greens in there. But of course, instead of making them super bright, I went for that more desaturated, soft and muted look because I like it like that. Anyways, we are moving on to the quote page. I have already started here. So I made this page similar to the quote page by adding a grid background to the quote itself, and then I drew in a little teacup, and it's kind of hard to see here, but I actually have paintbrushes and like other writing utensils sitting inside of the teacup. And then I went ahead and filled in all of the sketches with gouache paint, and I went with a more creamy off-white color for the teacup just to give it a little bit more contrast from the sage green teacup on the cover. And then for the quote itself, it's actually not a quote that I took from anyone in particular. It's kind of a more of a reminder to myself. So it says, "Dear self, remember to be who you are. Pleasing others comes at a cost, a big one, a dangerous one, and that's self-abandonment. You need yourself, so keep being you. You are precious." And the inspiration for this page actually came from one of my captions that I wrote on Instagram pretty recently. And in my caption, I talk about how I realized something really big in my life. And it's basically the fact that like one of the hardest things I'm going to do in my entire life is going to be showing who I really am to another human being. And even though I intellectually understood this to be like a difficult thing to do, I didn't actually feel it really in my gut until pretty recently and what that actually means for me. Like I realized that the reason why I self-destruct or engage in self-sabotaging behaviors, or why I drank and used, or why I'm engaged in people-pleasing tendencies is because I'm actually afraid to share how I really feel. So basically, instead of telling you that, okay, this is what's bothering me, this is what triggers me, this is not going to work for me, I become someone that is more comfortable for you to deal with. And because I have a firm belief that we need ourselves in order to survive and also live a happy and healthy and joyful life, if we become people that we think the other person wants us to be, we end up getting resentful. We end up using drugs and alcohol in order to be what I think you want me to be. We end up becoming snarky and angry, and we start to lose ourselves in the process. That is the biggest cost of people pleasing. And I think we're just really afraid of letting people know who we really are and what our triggers are and what our feelings are. It's because we think people are going to leave us and we think they're going to reject us. So what we're actually doing is rejecting ourselves before anyone else has the opportunity to do so. And it's like we're rejecting ourselves, thinking that we're actually saving us the pain from losing people, but actually we're then just feeling the pain of losing ourselves. And now not only are we feeling the pain of losing ourselves, but we're actually paying another cost, and that cost is that we're never going to find our people if we're not willing to show ourselves. And I know we are now in the monthly page spread, and I went off on a really long tangent there, but honestly this was a really big realization for me, because I don't ever want to lose myself again. Even if I lose other people, I don't want to lose myself. I'd rather lose you than lose myself. So this basically means I'm gonna have to put myself in situations where I'm gonna have to be very vocal about who I am and what my needs are and what I need from other people, and that is gonna be extremely uncomfortable for me. But the thing is no one said growth was gonna be easy. It is simple if you really think about it, but definitely not easy. And so that leads me to the quote for my monthly page, and it says, "Will I sit in the oh-so necessary fire of my own becoming?" I realize now that when the pain comes in my life, I can either give all of my power over to the pain itself, or I can ask the pain questions like, why are you here? What are you here to teach me? Is there a boundary violation that is being crossed here by me or someone else? Or maybe I'm just supposed to feel the pain and that really is all it is. But by doing these things, right, like acknowledging the pain and really giving it the space it needs to process and heal, I am going to grow. I am going to get to know myself on a much deeper level. I'm going to actually be able to figure out what my needs are, because really it's going to be hard for me to show who I am to other people if I myself don't even know who I am. And so I realized that in order to get to know myself, I need to do it straight through the pain. Okay, so I know I didn't really talk too much about the monthly page itself, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I kind of do the same layout every single month in my bullet journal. So I have the monthly calendar, and then I have the to list, the task list, and then the intentions list. I added a grid under the list to make it cohesive with the cover and the quote page, and I added a botanical sticker that I actually made myself. And I actually went over the quote to make it a little bit thicker because it was just too thin. It didn't look right. Okay, so now we are moving on to the July habit and mood trackers. So for this page, I kept it pretty simple and very similar to last month's layout, and the habits I'm tracking are the same 8 that I've been tracking: my Instagram post, journaling, reading, prayer, meeting, sponsor, self-care, and makeup. And then actually I did change some of my mood trackers. So before I was tracking my mood, my focus, anxiety, and irritability. So I actually replaced irritability with moodiness, and then I replaced mood with me. And I say me because I actually think it would be interesting to track how much I feel connected to myself on a daily basis. Because honestly, I know when I'm not feeling like myself, because when I'm not feeling like myself, I'm like in a fear bubble, or I'm just overthinking everything. I'm trying to control and manage everything. But when I'm myself, or when I'm feeling like myself, it basically just means that I can I don't have to feel guilt or shame over who I am or what I'm feeling. So for example, if I'm feeling like irritability or anger or sadness, I won't feel guilty or shameful over it. I'll understand why I'm feeling that way and just acknowledge it and know that, hey, I'll just be kinder to myself by understanding like this is just how I feel sometimes, and there's a reason for it, and there's nothing to feel ashamed about here. But most of the time, I don't really go into that level of self-acceptance right away. There's usually a process where first I am definitely feeling horrible about myself for having feelings in the first place, and then eventually I get to a point of self-acceptance and love and kindness towards myself. And basically, the goal here is to shorten the gap from the guilt and shame and feeling horrible about myself to complete self-acceptance and acknowledgement of, okay, wherever I am is totally okay. And we do that by getting still and basically allowing ourselves to process our feelings and just reconnecting to ourselves. And that is why I wrote "Be still and know" on this page on the right hand side. So that was a very long explanation of why I changed one of my mood trackers, but that is the reason, and now we will be moving on. So earlier I actually said I was going to talk a little bit more about my lack of motivation when it came to bullet journaling, and what I wanted to say was that because there was a part of me that didn't want to create any of these bujo spreads, I actually had to look inwards and ask myself, okay, like how can I create these page spreads but not suffer in the process? Because yeah, I could have actually just taken a break from bullet journaling altogether, but I actually understand now that bullet journaling does provide a level of sanity and organization in my life that I do need to feel okay. Like this is literally one of my tools in my toolbox. So I came to the conclusion that I needed to figure out a way to make this fun for me. And so if you saw my last video on YouTube, I reviewed the Mellow Days watercolor journal. And in that video, I picked up paint and paintbrushes for the first time after years. And this basically reignited my love for painting. And so I basically thought to myself, like, okay, like that is what I want to do for this month's theme. Okay, so you know how I said that I wanted to make my bullet journal pages be less time consuming? Yeah, well, okay, these teacups literally took me forever to paint. I think it took me like 3 or 4 days to film this entire bujo setup, and that is definitely not how much time I want to spend on my page spreads. But because I value creativity and making time for it in my daily life, I kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone by exploring this new medium of gouache and also getting my page spreads done. And so I guess you can say that was my solution to feeling unmotivated, because I didn't want a bullet journal, but I did want to paint, so I just combined the two. And thank God for 160 GSM bullet journals, because I don't have any warping in this bullet journal. And you may have noticed I did switch over to a brand new bullet journal here. I am using Notebook Therapy, and I have not created any of my setup pages yet. I'm gonna do it after I'm done with the July plan with me, because this was definitely a little bit more important in the sequence of events, I guess. So definitely keep a lookout for the mid-year bullet journal migration setup. And also, if you would like to get a Notebook Therapy bullet journal, they have 160 GSM bullet journals, and they are absolutely beautiful. You can find links to their stationery shop in the description down below, and use code Leela for 10% off. So another thing I wanted to mention here was that, okay, this is literally the second time I've ever used gouache in my entire life. The first time was when I created the Mellow Days bullet journal review, which was only a couple weeks ago. And in that video, I kind of just dove right into the painting without really researching it or doing a paint test or anything like that. But in between the time of creating that video and this video, I did my research, and basically this medium is, you could say it has characteristics of both watercolor and acrylic. For example, I think the consistency and the thickness of this medium is very similar to acrylic paint, while it's similar to the watercolor paint because both mediums actually get activated by using water. So actually, one of the biggest challenges I faced while using this paint was that this medium actually gets reactivated every time you put water on it. So for example, if you've already laid paint down and then you want to layer on top of it using paint and water, the paint that's underneath is going to get reactivated. So basically, gouache is a medium that you kind of want to work really quickly with, especially if you're not using thick watercolor paper, because you can risk the paint getting really muddy and essentially using so much water that your pages are going to end up warping. I hope that makes sense. But honestly, for the amount of water I did use, I'm actually surprised there's not a lot of warping that happened in this bullet journal, which honestly, I'm not complaining. So I'm basically just adding some final touches here. I did add a grid background to each of my habits, and then I also am decorating the page with washi tape from the washi tape shop and pieces of book pages, and now we are going on to the weekly page. I was honestly all out of ideas when creating this page, so I actually had to open up some of my older bullet journals and get some inspiration from over there, and essentially I just came up with creating a giant rectangle with different sections in place for the different elements that I need in a weekly spread. I absolutely love how it looks because I was able to keep it minimal, and I was also able to add every element I needed, like the days of the week, the July header, the notes and gratitude section, a numerical calendar, and a doodle of a vintage teacup with some plants coming out of it. I even had enough place to add add another quote. Yay! Okay, so this quote says, "Sometimes brave looks like standing completely alone as long as I am staying true to myself." By the way, these aren't anyone else's words. These are my own words acting as a reminder to hold on to when I confront situations where I might need them. For example, I actually needed these words when I went to a social gathering, I think 2 nights ago. Hopefully I have enough time to share this story with you guys, but basically I was at a wedding ceremony, not an actual wedding, but a wedding ceremony that precedes the actual wedding, and we have a lot of these in Indian culture. And this particular wedding ceremony is called a Sangeet, where we celebrate music, and there was a bar there. And many of you know that I'm actually sober. I am 3 years into recovery, so I do not drink or do drugs. And usually when I'm at an event like this and there's like drinking going on and someone asks me to like take a shot with them or something, and I just say, "Oh, I don't drink anymore," usually they just leave it alone, leave me alone, and we just go on with the rest of the night. But on this particular night, this guy literally would not leave me alone. Like, he just kept asking me to take a shot with him, and finally I just had to tell him, like, "Look, I'm in recovery, I'm an alcoholic, I don't drink, I'm 3 years sober." And then he proceeds to tell me that I'm joking, that I am not really an alcoholic, and completely invalidates my experience by saying that he's a doctor so he would know. And all I could think in that situation was, holy shit, if I was a man right now, this guy would not be saying any of this. So as someone who has previously been an alcoholic, and as someone who generally is introverted and doesn't really like social gatherings, and as someone who's a people pleaser, getting asked the same question over and over to something that I've already said no to is extremely uncomfortable for me. And so the low self-esteem past me probably would have just laughed along with him, because I don't want to risk making it awkward or making him uncomfortable, so I'd rather just make myself feel uncomfortable. But because recently I took a vow to myself that I am not going to abandon myself, I did not stand for it that night. And so basically, without even thinking, words just came out of my mouth, and all of a sudden I'm saying things like, "I need you to believe me right now. This is my life. This isn't a joke." And I could just see his whole entire demeanor just change. And I just felt so incredibly empowered and proud of myself. And all of a sudden now he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And then he actually just started asking me real questions about myself. And we ended up having a really nice conversation, because I also had to have the ability to forgive. And this could not have happened if I wasn't willing to stand alone and be true to myself. Crazy story, right? Yeah, well, let me tell you, this is literally the first time I ever stood up for myself, and like, it felt like I was putting my needs and comfort levels before someone else's need to like joke around. And it was like as if I didn't feel any guilt or shame for what I was feeling to begin with, right? Because we shouldn't have to feel ashamed of who we are and how we're feeling. Like, yeah, maybe we should take responsibility for it, but we shouldn't feel like we're wrong for what we're feeling. And in that moment, I really understood that, even though it risked potentially, being shunned or made fun of or whatever, because those are the actual fears that are going on in my head, right? Anyways, I think I said enough about that. I am really happy I was able to finish these bullet journal page spreads. I feel so accomplished. I'm really happy with the way they turned out. I really hope you guys liked them too. I'm actually gonna go clean my room now because it's an absolute disaster. I hope you guys learned something new in this video, and I really hope you guys are having a lovely day today or night, wherever you might be. And if no one told you they loved you today, I love you so very much.